Tes Zayin Chav Tes. Okay, I want to do two. I want to do two things and then get on to Parshas Kedosha very quickly. In 1629 page.
I'm so sorry, Rabbi. We are switching. We've been instructed by Rabbi Kaufman that we have to now use these. So put this on. And then get him.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. We're on page 644.
Thank you, Cap.
644. No, 642, sorry. So I just want 2 points very quickly. It says about 6 lines, 7 lines from the top. It says, Uba Aaron el Oil Moed. We could close that door now because the air conditioning's on. It says, Uba Aaron el Oil Moed, at the end of the service. Upashat es bigdei abad asher lovash. He removes the garments that he had been wearing b'voel hakodesh v'inicham sham. He puts them over there. Now look at Rashi on pasuk 23. Rashi says, v'inicham sham. It's the left column of Rashi, top line. V'inicham sham. He places the garments over there. B'lamed she'teunin geniza. They need to be buried away, stored away. V'lo yishtamesh ba'osan arba begadim liyom kippur macher. He doesn't use those 4 garments on another Yom Kippur. That means the next year the Kohen Gadol wears different garments. Why is it that he doesn't wear the same garments that he wore that year? So the Mefarshim explain, and this is something that I think that people think about around Yom Kippur time. You know, you go into Yom Kippur, we know there's a day of judgment. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur is a day of judgment. And sometimes people thinking, you know, I wasn't so bad this year. I didn't kidnap and cannibalize anybody, and I didn't worship idol. I didn't, I spoke a little Lashon Hara. I was, misdavening a couple of times. I wasn't a horrific person. I didn't have a bullet belonging in Alcatraz. So, why should this year? I lived through last year. Why should this year be any different? So the Torah is telling us, no. Each year it's a different calculation, because sometimes a person may have an account that's accumulating, and he doesn't know that it's accumulating. So in order that the Kohen Gadol the next year should not become overconfident, because he makes it to the next year, he's still the Kohen Gadol. Now if he puts on the same garments, he may be thinking to himself, well, I wore these garments last year and I was okay, so I should be okay this year. Therefore those garments are put away, and he's got to put on, it's a new set, it's a completely new judgment. Number one. The second point here, I want to get on to Kedoshim today. The second point is right at the end, where is it? 1 second, where are we here? What happened here? Oh, here we go. Take a look at Perek Yud Ches Pasuk Chaf Aleph. So here the Torah goes, and the Torah started talking about all the forbidden relationships. And by the way, we read this section of Acharei, when we read this in the Torah, besides when it comes out during the week, like this week, you know when else we read this? The forbidden relationships? At Mincha on Yom Kippur. It means on Yom Kippur, you're fasting, and we're weak, and we're tired, and we're hungry, and we're in an elevated state of atonement, of tshuva. And what do we have to read about in the Torah? Don't commit this immorality, don't commit that immorality, because at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to. That's the big one. For us, that's the biggie nowadays. In the old days, it was idol worship and immorality. But for us, it's immorality. So we read this now. As you're reading through all of these, your father's sister and your mother's sister and your sister and your other, you're reading all these, your daughter-in-law, all these these relationships. And then in Pasuk Chaf Aleph, on page 652. On page 652, 5 lines from the bottom. Umizarach, last word on the line. Umizaracha lo sitein lehavir lamolech. Do not give your offspring to pass through the molech offering. V'lo sechal l'shem elokecha ani Hashem. Do not desecrate God's name. So what is this molech? It's a certain type of idol worship. And according to the Gemara, there are two opinions. There's one opinion that they took a child, they gave him to the priests of Moloch. There were two pillars of fire, and the priests walked the child between the pillars of fire. That was one form of one opinion. There's another opinion that actually burnt the child to death. And the description of Moloch, according to that, if you ever saw the movie The Ten Commandments, so it shall be written, so it shall be done. Right? Yul Brenner plays Paro, the Jew plays Paro, and Charlton Heston, the anti-Semite, plays Moses. So they got the script slightly backwards. But they have in the movie, in the plague of the firstborn, when they do the plague of it, so Pharaoh's son dies. And they have this idol, this Egyptian idol with his arms stretched out, I think he got the head of a fish or something, and they place the child across this idol. Now where did they get to try to bring him back to life? Now where did they get this idea from? Because the Medrash describes Molech as a hollowed out metal it's a hollowed out metal with arms outstretched, and they laid a fire inside. Now when you light a fire inside metal, what happens to the metal? It gets very, very hot. Then they lay the child across the arms of this blazing hot idol, and the child screams in agony. And what they would do is they would do it in some sort of internal chamber where the priests of Moloch would beat drums on the outside to drown out the child's screams. That was the first question is, what kind of idol? I mean, what's with that? And human sacrifice in general. The ancients, the pagans, there was something called human sacrifice, which always begs the question of how they determined who's the sacrifice. Harold, can we talk to you for a second? Yeah. Have you got a few minutes today? Yeah. Can you mind lying across those blazing hot arms of the idol or whatever it was that they did? So according to the commentaries, this begs a question because then it goes, now look at the next pasuk. We're going to come back to this in a second. Look at the next pasuk. The next pasuk says, Ve'ez zachar lo tishkav bishke ve'isha. Do not commit homosexuality. To'evahi, it's an abomination. Uvechol behema lo sifta shchavtecha letamava. Don't commit bestiality. V'isha lo samo liftei behema. And a woman should not commit bestiality. So how did you all of a sudden, and then the Torah says, don't defile yourself with all of these various affairs. How did this idol worship get thrown in the middle of a whole list of abominations, of immoral abominations?
Is it comparing the same idea of you doing these abominations to idol worship?
So it's a good point. There is a comparison, but idol worship actually gets a worse punishment than many of the immoral abominations. So how did this creep in over here? What do you say, Avi?
So, is this, well, you mentioned Molech, people would sacrifice their children to him. In some way, if you're using sexuality in this forbidden manner, you are sacrificing your children.
But how does, okay, interesting idea. So here, the commentaries say like this. First of all, who do you think they would choose to use as a sacrifice? Well, some guy, he had a relationship with his sister or with somebody else's wife, and a child was born. And you know what? This child, that's a spare child right there. And therefore, that is likely to be, according to the commentaries, it's likely that they use the illegitimate products of these illicit relationships. That's how you got to a thing like Moloch, to get them out, take them out of the picture. And the proof is, because then it goes to two forms of immorality which do not produce children, which is homosexuality and bestiality. In other words, after we're done producing the children, then we talk about Moloch, and then we go back to our feature program, which is immorality, but immorality that doesn't produce children. That's one opinion. Now there's another opinion where you have to ask, who would sacrifice a child? Let's say it wasn't an illegitimate child. That's one approach. But let's say there's another approach. It's just a child. They selected a child. So there are Meforshim that say that the ancients believed that if you gave up one family member, so then the rest of the family would be protected. I mean, there would be prosperity and health and good everything for the rest of the family as long as you gave up one child to the God. You appease the gods by giving up one child. And therefore the Torah says we don't do that. But then the Torah ends, V'lo sechal Hashem Elokecha ani Hashem. Don't desecrate God's name. Now why is this particular form of idol worship, why is that considered a desecration of God's name? How are you desecrating God's name by doing this? What's a desecration? What do you say, Binyamin?
Sorry, earlier Rabbi
have prosperity and peace, could it be then because in so doing that's not showing bitachon and emunah in Hashem? That
You're close. You're on the right track. You're on the right track. The Mefarshim say he said by doing so you're not showing trust in God. Then again, when we daven, what about when you daven? So you daven, you're petitioning God directly. But according to that, all idol worship is a sidetracking of God from God, because we're supposed to speak directly to God, and so all idol worship is really a flaw in our trust in God. So yeah, what do you say, babe?
So, I think people could often learn the Torah, learn the halachos, and think that by learning God's word, we understand God, and then you can start to take these extra stringencies upon yourself that can lead to something as extreme as idol worship. And God is saying, now I'm telling you what not to do, and you shouldn't do these things because I'm telling you not to do it. Don't
So-
take it into your own.
So what you're saying, there's a lot to what you're saying, because idol worship, if you look at the Rambam, how did original idol worship start? Original idol worship was that the idol worshippers used the sun, the moon, the stars, or all the idols as an intermediary to get to God, because they thought we're doing a good thing. We're worshiping God, but through an intermediary. But God says that exactly is what I don't want you to do. That is idol worship. That was the original idol worship. So what the Mefarshim explain is, what's the maximum that we could do when it comes to sacrifices? The maximum we could do is to bring animals as sacrifices. Basically. Now you're upgrading that, and you're showing a greater devotion to the idol than you could possibly show to God. That's a desecration of God's name. That's a chilul Hashem. That's a desecration of God's name. 1 second. That's a desecration, number one. Number two, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein says there's a Musar lesson for us. I mean, I don't assume anybody here is going to be involved in Molech. I don't think anybody's going to be getting involved in this ritual. Certainly doesn't want to be the one who is being offered to Molech. But Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, so what's in it for us over here? I mean, this is some bizarre stuff over here. What's in it for us? Rabbi Moshe Feinstein says a person always has to look and see what kind of energies and enthusiasm is he putting into his service of God. What kind of energies and enthusiasm is he putting into his own interests and pursuits? And sometimes, you have the same person who, when he's learning Gemara, he's yawning and he's tired and it's hard. Listen, it's a challenge. But then the same guy who decides to go watch a movie doesn't bat an eyelash the entire time. They sits there with some popcorn and he's good to go. And it's more the excitement of doing it. So where's our enthusiasm over here? When I serve guests, do I serve guests with the same enthusiasm and treat them as well as I treat myself when I serve myself? Or when you spend money, when you got to spend money on either a lulav and an esrog or on tefillin or on something like that, versus spending money on a vacation or on a piece of equipment, how much and where and with what enthusiasm are we doing it? And therefore, we're being held to a certain standard. Well, listen, when it comes to serving God, okay, we'll get it done. When it comes to taking care of our own personal pursuits, so we may be a little more enthusiastic. Says Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, well, that's got to be measured over here. The same way that Molech is a higher level of devotion based on what we could do in our service of God by bringing animal sacrifices, the same way we always have to ask ourselves, how excited are you about doing this and how excited about doing that? I don't say any of this is easy. I've never said any of it is easy. It's just something that we're constantly moving forward. That's one of the things to keep in mind. What do you want to ask, Jack?
I don't remember.
Oh, it worked again. If you remember, you ask. Okay. Now, let's go on to Kedoshim. Acharei Kedoshim. So, Vaydaber, page 656.
Oh.
Yes. Didn't work. Huh? Go ahead.
The sacrifices that we do give,
Yes.
obviously, God forbid, idol worship should ever be a thing for any of us to deal with, but the sacrifices that we give are in place of ourselves, are they not?
There is an idea that when you bring this out, you're supposed to be looking at the animal in the Beis Hamikdash, or whatever they do to the animal, a person's supposed to be thinking, that's what deserves to happen to me.
Like Yitzchak's.
Like Yitzchak, by all korbanos, the Mefarshim say when they bring the korban, they shecht that the person should be saying for my avera, that deserves. I deserve that, and skinning and burning and cutting up and everything else. I deserve it. That's what it's supposed to have. What do you used to call in school? Show and tell, or visual aids? No, that's not the. It's a visual aid. And when you went into the Beis Hamikdash, you have to remember there were three outside aids to help a person to do tshuva. Number one, there's what's happening to the sacrifice. Number two, the Levium are singing. And the singing of the Levium could actually alone inspire a person to do tshuva, as opposed to today's music, which could inspire a person to do all sorts of averas, even what they call contemporary Jewish music, which is neither contemporary nor Jewish nor music. And sometimes you listen to some of this Jewish music, you just feel like breaking a window. You know, that's not the Levium and the Beis Hamikdash had to train for 5 years before they joined the choir. Just some guy picked up a pot and pan and started making noise. You know, it was they had a train. They had musical instruments, and it was a whole training. Number one, the ketoris, which we mentioned yesterday, the incense that was burning in the Beis Hamikdash, the smell of the incense could inspire somebody to do tshuva. So there's a lot happening there. You know, it's the difference between davening in your room and davening in a shul. You walk into a shul and you got the walls that there's a Sefer Torah and an Aron Kodesh, and people around you are wearing tefillin and it's got that talus smell. Everything about the shul, that old musty shul smell with some old musty siddur, everything about it is kind of, it moves us in the direction of getting more focused. In the Beis Hamikdash was extremely focused. Okay, let's go to Parsha Kedoshim. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe lemor. Daber al kol hadas b'nei Yisrael. Speak to the Jewish people and say to them, Kedoshim ti'iyu, you should be holy. Ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokechem, for I, Hashem your God, am holy. Now, this word holiness is really something that needs to be understood. What does it mean? When you picture holy, what comes to mind? When you picture, he's holy. What do you picture? Rabbanim. Ooh, you're a good person. On an individual level, how do you picture somebody being holy? How do you picture anybody? How do you picture them being holy?
Wearing white.
Wearing white. I'm kind of walking around like this. Like that. I am holy. No, I'm not holy. I have a stiff neck. So what is Kedusha? What is Kedusha? So take a look at Rashi first. Says Rashi, Daber al kol hadas b'nei Yisrael. Milamed shenemra parsha zu behikohel. This parsha was said when he gathered all the Jewish people together. Mipnei sherov gufei Torah tluyim ba, page 656, because most fundamentals of Torah are dependent on it. Then it says kedoshim tiyu. Says Rashi, hevu prushim minha arayos. Separate yourself from immorality. Uminha avera, and from sin. Shekol makom she'ata motzei geder erva, where you find fences to block off immorality, ata motzei kedusha. That's where you find holiness. Says Rashi, staying away from the forbidden relationships. The Ramban says, well, that it already says. The Torah goes on and tells. The Torah just said what you shouldn't do. So what are you adding over here? Kedoshim to you, stay away from the forbidden. You just told me in the previous parsha, stay away from the forbidden relationships. So the Ramban has a different spin on it. The Ramban says, Kedoshim kadesh atzmecha b'muter lach. Make yourself kadosh in the permissible areas. And the Ramban introduces an expression, which is a very famous expression, which is thrown or bantered about often. And it says, don't become what's called a novel birshus haTorah, a glutton with Torah sanction. And what that means is, some people see 613 mitzvos. We have 613 mitzvos to do. Other people see 613 problems. We got to get around these problems. So Baruch Hashem, we've gotten around the problem of not being allowed to eat meat and milk. Because you could have a beef burger with parva cheese, and you could have a parva burger with milchik cheese. Baruch Hashem, we took care of the problem of meat and milk. Now, what's the next problem? Bacon. Oh, Baruch Hashem, now we have kosher bacon. Took care of the problem of bacon. Oh, the problem of women wearing shaitels. Oh, so now you can wear a shaitel that looks far better than your natural hair, and it looks like they're actually punk shaitels. You can wear a punk shaitel. Oh, that's really within the spirit of the law, isn't it? Or you can wear a long flowing shaitel. All of these things, by the letter of the law, you haven't done anything wrong. We got around the problem. If you see pictures of shaitels from pre-war Europe, the types of shaitels that the women wore pre-war Europe, I told you it looks like the theoretical possibility of matter without form. That's what those shaitels look like. Look like somebody took glued together a bunch of hair and some lady dropped it on her head, and it looks like almost like a motorcycle helmet. It's got no. And nowadays, so these are all things that there's an attitude over here. What was the goal over here? Is the goal over here? Can I trouble you take the goal over here? The goal over here is what? The goal over here is to get around the Torah. That means a person could keep the Torah. We have an obstacle course to get through, a bunch of prohibitions. We managed to get through that obstacle course. That's what the Ramban says. It calls such a person as a novel birshus HaTorah. I'm doing everything according to halacha, but I'm a glutton. I could indulge myself and gratify all nerve endings with Torah sanction. Man only lives with his wife, or a man eats as much as he wants. And the Ramban says, Kedoshim Tiyu. Where does Kedusha, when we learned the Gemara in Kedusha, when it says, Ha'isha Mekudeshes. What is Ha'isha Mekudeshes? Why does it say a woman is betrothed to her husband? Why does it called Kedushin? Remember we learned Kedushin? What does Kedushin mean? It means Kedusha, but what is the word, what is the Gemara translated? She's betrothed. That's the halachic status, but what does the word mean? She is separated from other men. Kedusha means separation. When you think about being holy, how do we become holy? Holy is not an active pursuit towards Kedusha. Holy is an active pursuit to get away from the inappropriate. And then the Kedusha happens by itself. If we avoid the inappropriate, the Kedusha we are basically helium balloons. A Jewish neshama, what's that?
Isn't avoiding the inappropriate the Kedusha?
That is the Kedusha. In other words, no, that's the first step. That's how we can't access Kedusha, because Hashem is Kedusha. Kedusha is given to us as a gift. Get to you 1 second. Hold the questions for a few minutes. Kedusha that means every Jewish neshama has got Kedusha to it. What's stopping us from accessing the Kedusha? Because we've got the string. We are a helium balloon. Picture a helium balloon. Do you know if you take a helium balloon and you blow it in? Have you ever done that? You breathe in the helium balloon and you talk funny? I didn't even know that till a few years ago. It was an Ohr Somayach guy who showed me that. It was at my house. He showed me that. That's one of the fringe benefits of teaching at Ohr Somayach. You learn these important things. And my wife was all nervous. She was like, "Is he gonna be okay? Yeah, he'll be fine. As good as an Ohr Somayach guy could be, but he'll be fine." And if a helium balloon is tied down, what do you got to do to let it go? You don't have to do anything other than cut the strings. Cut the string. Have you ever been in a hot air balloon? You never been in a hot air balloon? One of those things that goes way up in the air? Oh, I remember when we used to do that. It was great. We had these contests going up in a hot air balloon. And you look over that, you're in a basket, the basket about this big, and you look over, we're only about 20,000 feet up. It's really neat. It's really, really, really neat. And if you believe that, I'll sell you a bridge. Do you really think I would be in a hot air balloon, gentlemen? I have jumped up and down on my bed. That I've done. But I would not be anywhere near a hot air balloon. Now, how does a hot air balloon do? You just cut the strings and off it goes. That's our neshama. If we would be able to cut the strings, our neshama would soar. Then we do the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs bring in more kedusha. But kedusha means separation. It means separating ourselves from those things that are holding us back. That's kedusha. That's Kedusha. Kedusha does not mean this idea of closing your eyes real tight during Shemon Esrei. I mean, I've seen some guys daven Shemon Esrei like this. I'm worried they're gonna hurt themselves. The guy's walking around with a neck brace, so I got whiplash. I was davening Shemon Esrei. You don't. That's like in immersing. You're gonna go to Meron. You probably stop in Sfas and immerse in the Arizal's mikveh. Right? I think the water's really cold. There's no difference if you immerse in a cold mikveh or in a warm mikveh. There's really no difference. It doesn't have the colder it is, the holier I am. No, the colder it is, the closer a person is to pneumonia. That's what we think of as Kedusha. And not only that, even more than that. Look at the first Rashi. Melamed shenemru Parsha zu behikohel. This Parsha was said to the Jewish people collectively. Sometimes people think to be holy, you have to go off by yourself. Be a lone ranger and go do hisbodedus. Now, a little bit of hisbodedus once in a while, but you can do hisbodedus. You don't have to go to a forest to do hisbodedus. You can do hisbodedus in your own room. Just sit there and think a little bit. What is my purpose in life? Was I put in this world to sit with a device like this on a couch at every opportunity? Or are there other things in life that I could accomplish? That's Hisbodedus right there. You don't have to go to a forest where there are wolves. You don't have to do that and call a helicopter rescue to find you in some abandoned creek in Israel. All you have to do is think a little bit. I had a guy here once who was into meditation. So he told me his graduation gift from college is his parents provided him with the means. He rented a shack somewhere in the backwoods of Virginia, out in Nowheresville, in some forest or some wilderness in Virginia. He rented a shack, and for 3 months he was alone. Once a day, he would pick up a phone and just say, everything's okay, and hang up, and he was alone and he said he meditated. He started out 2 hours a day, he got 4, he was eventually meditating 12 hours a day. That's not healthy. That's not healthy. Judaism doesn't expect that from us. Judaism says, Bihikala was saying, you're part of a group. You're part of what do you call it? You're part of the collective of the Jewish people. And you want Kedusha? Kedusha is getting up for an old lady on a bus. That's Kedusha. Kedusha is serving somebody a meal. Kedusha is helping out a roommate who's sick and bringing him food from the lunchroom. That's Kedusha. The Kedusha means being part of a group. But the first step in Kedusha is to cut off the ties. Yehuda, you were going to ask something.
It's on the previous chapter on the relationships.
Yes.
So you can't be with two sisters.
Correct.
So if I'm married to one girl and we get divorced, and my brother is married to the sister,
She's off limits to you forever.
so when he dies,
Unless there's yibum, a yibum situation. But that's already, that gets a little tricky and complicated. A man is not allowed to marry his wife's sister, but if the wife dies, he can marry the sister. He's not allowed to marry them while they're both alive. Because a co-wife, what's the word for a co-wife? And do you know what the word, you have a mother-in-law, chamoto, chosno is the father-in-law. What is the word for a co-wife in Hebrew? A tzara. That's a co-wife. Two women, what is their relation? You have a brother-in-law, a sister-in-law, and this is my co-wife. You're one wife, and this is the co-wife. What's your co-wife called? She is your tzara. That's what they're called. They're called a tzara, exactly for the Hebrew word, tzara. The reason a man can't marry two sisters is because sisters, by definition, sisters naturally have a close relationship. If a man marries two sisters while they're alive, so then he is going to create animosity. That creates animosity between the sisters. Therefore, if one dies, then he can marry the second one. Then he can marry the second sister. But he can't marry them. If he divorces his wife, he can't marry the second sister until and unless his wife dies, even after he divorces her.
how they engaged even.
What's that?
Because one of the commentaries was saying if you try do kedushin with a forbidden relationship, the kedushin never kicks in. So then how are you?
No, he divorces his wife.
Even if he's still married to his wife, how does he?
He can't. After his wife dies, then he can marry his sister. Her sister, not his sister. What's not clear?
Yeah.
And if he divorces his wife and he wants to marry her sister, he still has to wait till his ex-wife dies before he marries his sister. I knew a case when I was in high school. There was the principal at a high school was he was married to a woman from Europe who had a sister who never got married, and she lived with them in the house. She lived with them. They used to take walks on Shabbos together, the three of them. She lived with them. These two sisters were, I think they came out of Europe. They had no family. So the sister who never got married lived with them. And this couple was married for they must have been married about 40, 50 years. And eventually they moved to Israel. They're already probably in their 70s, 80s. And eventually they moved to Israel. And the married wife got sick, and then she died. Now they had a problem, because he can't be alone in the house with they're not married. The sister-in-law, they're not married. And they're alone in the same house, and they're an older couple. So they didn't know what to do. So they got married. That took care of the problem. They just got married. I knew her for about 50 years, so it was a long shit. He knew her. There wasn't much to find out. You didn't have to check out any backgrounds over here. And then that took care of the problem, because otherwise they have a problem in Yichud. They can't stay in the same house together because there's no relationship. Yeah, Lenny.
What was the word you used that Rashi said about the
problem. You said people who look at mitzvahs as problems.
I didn't, Rashi doesn't say, the Ramban says a person is a glutton, is a novel birshus Torah. Novel means like a glutton, but it's related to the word mabul. Novel means to wilt away. The person who indulges himself eventually wears out.
So how is that different than when there's a bunch of dops of Gemara on how to charge someone interest even though we can't really charge interest? Because then it's like,
Well,
it's almost like the negative commandment of charging interest is a hindrance, and we're treating that negative commandment as a problem.
It's not that it's a problem. You have to always look at a problem from two directions. I'm not allowed to lend you money with interest. You want to borrow money with interest. You're not allowed to borrow money with interest. Now, the halacha, built into the halacha, is that there is a way to do it in a permissible way where it's turned into more of an investment. It's not literally a loan. There are certain times where there are what we would call, I don't like calling it a loophole because a loophole sounds like it's something sneaky and shifty. But it's not. It's built into the halacha. That's built into the halacha. But the attitude isn't to try to get around things. The attitude is, this is what the Torah wants us to do.
But then why not wear the punk shaitel like you
Because because everybody knows that that's not what the Torah wants. Everybody knows it's defeating the purpose. We understand a woman is allowed to look good and a woman's allowed to feel good about herself. Everybody knows that there's a difference between a woman feeling good about herself and a woman wearing something that causes other people to look at her. Everybody knows that.
So then everybody should know that cash advance is immoral.
Before you get to, leave the interest out. You're trying to pull it back in that direction. We're not going in that direction. There's a concept that a person knows that this is really not what I should. This is not what. There's a certain sense you develop. The more Torah you learn and the more you live a Torah lifestyle, you develop. And by the way, you could often trust your if your conscience is bothering you, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. Because it's probably beyond, it's not something that you at your level should be doing. Leave the interest alone, unless you need a loan. Yeah, Nick, what do you need?
You know, in addition to Lenny with the wigs, I'm somewhat confused. You know, because the prohibition is really to get us to not look.
No. The prohibition is that a woman is not allowed to have her hair uncovered more than a tefach, and a man is not allowed to look at a woman's uncovered hair. That's the letter of the law of the prohibition. Okay? Now, or you can't make a bracha facing the hair. That's the letter of the law of the prohibition. There's another prohibition. We're not supposed to look at women. Okay? Now, a woman is covering her hair. That's why I say in Hasidic circles, there are some that cover their, they never wear shaitels. There are certain Hasidic groups, there are women who will never wear a shaitel. They only wear a tichel, which is that nifty looking thing they tie around that bandana they tie around their hair. And they're in certain Hasidic groups where they wear a shaitel, but on top of the shaitel, have you ever seen them wear a shaitel and a little hat on top of the shaitel? Some don't wear that at all. Okay, but let's get clear what the prohibition is. The prohibition, so a woman covers her hair. She's not allowed to have her hair exposed if she's a married woman. She covers her hair. And by the way, single girls, how do they wear their hair? Either in a ponytail, generally in a ponytail. From girls, because if the hair is out, when the only time we find hair out in the Torah is a woman who's a sota, who's accused of adultery, and they're going to give her the water. They uncover her hair. Everybody knows that if a girl's hair is out, it looks like a horse's tail, right? That attracts more attention than when it's a ponytail. I didn't have sisters. My daughters, I used to grab their ponytails, and we would play tie the horse's tail to the chair. They didn't like that game. I loved it. But there's an attitude here. There's an attitude. And a person understands, what are you trying to do? Is this really what Hashem wants? But the question they always ask is, if Mashiach came today, would you be wearing that shaitel to greet Mashiach? Or would you run into the house and change it to something which you know is more appropriate? If Mashiach was here, we could lend with interest and that loophole. Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem. We would still do it.
Well, that's
and I would even lend money to Mashiach on a heter iska, right? But we wouldn't wear those shaitels, and it wouldn't walk around with a cheeseburger in front of Mashiach. Kosher. Nothing wrong with it, by the way. You want to have a burger with parva cheese? It's permissible, 100% permissible. They want to ask the posek, what if they have something that's even a cake that's baked to look like a pig. You know, they make cake designs. What if a cake looks like a pig? You know, a woman made a cake and it looks like a pig. You know, they can make it look like anything. Right? What if it looked like a pig? Right? There's no prohibition. It says don't eat pork. It doesn't say don't eat cake. It says don't eat pork. I could think I would say that it's in poor taste, no pun intended. I would say that it's in poor taste to make something that looks like a chazer. That I would say. You know, you can make a cake look like a submarine. Nothing wrong with it. I've always wondered what hard steel tastes like. Right? Nothing wrong with that. But to go and make it look like a chazer, what, you haven't got any other animals? How about an aardvark? That would be better. Anything would be better than a chazer.
So just in relation to what, obviously it's not breaking the halacha and they're following the rule, but what you're saying is that it's just not in the spirit.
It's not in the spirit of the law, correct.
But following that, why is it so commonplace to
That's a good question. So now he's asking, so why is it so common? Which begs another question: how do you know it's so common? A guy once came to the stipler, and he said a guy came to the stipler. He said, "There's a woman. I saw this woman, and she's wearing a sheitel, and I mean, it just looks like real hair. It was like real hair, but I couldn't tell if it was real hair or the sheitel." The stipler said, "What are you doing looking at her so intently?" This is the stipler said to this guy. That took care of him. Your question is a good question. So if it's really not right, and we know it's not right, so why are people do that? And other things that we do. We also know it's not right to speak Lashon Hara, and we kind of, maybe say, if I say it fast. If I say it fast and with a whisper, you know, maybe that'll go, you know, that's Lashon Hara. Just speed it up, Lashon Hara. You could even get more Gehenim because you get more words in. So there's sometimes people say, I don't know if you ever heard that guy says, you know, this might be Lashon Hara, but, you know, what do you call it? The fact that you just said that makes it worse. Because now there's no even room to even think that you did it unintentionally, that you didn't know. This might be Lashon. Well, this might be a gun, but boom. So what does the announcement help you? So the answer to your question is, people, we're put in this world because we have free choice and we have a Yetzer Hara. And for a woman, it's a very, very, first of all, it's very, very important for a woman to look good. And then the styles, and then there's peer pressure, and you got people advertising it, and a person's drawn in, and it's a very, very big battle. And a woman, she feels, I look better with this, therefore I'd rather wear this. And in the back of her mind, and there's also the pressure from the husband who may want her to do that because he wants her to be able to keep up with the other people who are doing it, and so on and so forth. Why is it? For the same reason that we have other problems. We're people. People are people. We have a battle. It's a constant battle in all areas of life. But what you said is, there's the spirit, there's the letter of the law, and there's the spirit of the law. And a person senses what the spirit of the law is. You know, if you go to the Shabbos table, you sit at the Shabbos table, and they put out sandwiches on Shabbos. Instead of cholent and roast chicken and whatever you have at the Shabbos table, they put out corned beef sandwiches at the Shabbos table. Is there anything wrong with it halachically? No, there's nothing wrong with it halachically. But it's certainly not the spirit of the law to sit at a Shabbos table with a hoagie. Right? That's not a Shabbos table. Or sushi. Right? That's not how Jews keep Shabbos. I don't know, sushi, you know, depends if you like sushi. Right? But it's not, you understand, there's a letter of the law and there's a spirit of the law. Okay, let's go on. I'll talk to you about the loan afterwards. And I didn't, Lenny. How much do you need? Now the other idea here is that when it says in the beginning of the pasuk, Daber el kol adas b'nei Yisrael, speak to all of the Jewish people. So first thing that tells you, there's nobody who can say, this is beyond my capability. El kol adas b'nei Yisrael. We could all achieve kedusha. Number one. Number two. Kol adas Yisrael, when you look at the Jewish people, how do we compare to other nations? Among ourselves, like Nick pointed out, we have our flaws. There are individuals with flaws in Kedusha. But as a nation, compared to other nations, how are we doing? Compared to other nations, we're doing pretty good. That's a kol kahal, because kahal Yisrael. That's the entire nation. There was the first Daf Yomi celebration, the first Siyum HaShas of the Daf Yomi was in Madison Square Garden. I hope they lost. They were. It was in Madison Square Garden. I never liked that name, by the way. I was at the Blackhawks, always playing the Rangers in Madison Square Garden. I remember thinking, well, why is it a square garden? And I never understood Madison Square Garden. I didn't, I wasn't the sharpest knife in the kitchen. And so they had this Daf Yomi celebration. So there was a non-Jewish cop. There were security guys there. About 20,000 people. Eventually it grew to 100,000 people at the last celebration. There were 20,000 people. So there's a non-Jewish cop. He lost his wallet. So he goes over to his friend. He says, the other cop says, darn it, I lost my wallet. His friend says, don't worry, with this crowd, you'll get it back. And sure enough, he got it back. Right? Imagine that happening at a Knicks game. A cop lost his wallet at a Knicks game. He wouldn't lose it. It would be pickpocketed. Right? They wouldn't lose it in a Knicks game. Who else in the world could there be 20,000 people and you know you're going to get your wallet back? There's a Catholic woman living. You guys ever been to Williamsburg? Williamsburg is hardcore Satmar, right? Hardcore Hasidim. There was a Catholic woman living right in the middle of Williamsburg. So somebody said to her, don't you feel kind of out of place here? This is, there's a Hasidic enclave over here and a Catholic woman. She says, no, I feel great here. I said, why? She says, because I know that I could walk the streets here and none of the men, they're not even going to look at me, right? Let alone try to do anything to me. Now, we can imagine any other neighborhood saying that in any other neighborhood. And so compared to others, when you compare us, do we have individual flaws? Yes, we do. Every one of us has flaws. And it could be a shaitel, it could be lashon hara, it could be talking during davening, it could be taking liberties in all sorts of areas, because we're not perfect. But as a group, as Kol Kahal Yisrael, that's Kedusha, the Kedusha of the Jewish people. And you just have to remember that Kedusha means separation. Kedusha is separation. And one of the separations of the Jew is separating ourselves from the nations. That we're separated from the other nations. That's one of the aspects of the Kedusha. Okay, Sunday we're going to continue with this, Amir Hashem, because I want a few more things in Kedoshim, and then we're going to go on to Parshas Emor, which is the Parsha talking about how you have to respect Kohanim.